All right.
So this
Good.
is
All of you. Yeah. Go, Mary.
This is the Be Your Own Therapist class where, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, we can mold our minds into any way we would like. And that's what we're going to do for an hour.
Exactly. You see how we can mold our mind. That's exactly right. So thinking we're just our little motivation for 1 hour, we're going to listen, think about this, contemplate. And even if we take 1% of it away and use it as a tool, this is the main thing. This is the point. It's practical, it's practical. So it's like advice coming from Buddha's teachings, really. So what I've been thinking about recently, we had a class last week, and then I just thinking about it more from my little videos as well on Facebook and everything, is about generosity. It sounds a curious kind of practice. I think of being generous, and it's kind of, so let's give it context, okay? This interesting approach, generosity, okay? So in the Lam as you know, in this structured path to enlightenment, the final stages are the practices of the bodhisattva. So the logic is that the bodhisattva's done the wisdom wing, they put themselves together, they're amazing beings, they've gone beyond delusions, and now they're practicing going from life after life after life, perfecting their relationship in relation to others in order to finally make this complete paradigm shift where they only exist for others based on wisdom. Now that's a Buddha, and that's what Buddha says every one of us has the potential to accomplish. So right now, we've got this, and it sounds peculiar because we think it's so normal, because we have this ego grasping, this constant instinctive primordial grasping at me, then naturally it creates other, doesn't it? We've got me and we have other. Then all the others are divided, as we know, into friends, enemies, and strangers. It's a really good way to put it. So what we're trying to do on the Bodhisattva path is break down those barriers till eventually, when you are this fully developed being, there literally would be no longer a sense of being separate. I mean, that sounds really weird to us, but this is what we're aiming for. So there's all these series of practices, they call them the perfections of the Bodhisattva. So the 6 of these, and the first 4 are kind of from life after life, these bodhisattvas bop along, connecting with sentient beings and practicing developing these relationship with others and wanting to be of benefit to them. Then the last 2 are where you perfect the inner part, that you can perfect the wisdom wing in your meditation, and you get to see the ultimate nature of reality, where also you cut down this artificial barrier between self and other. So in the first 4, the first one of these is called generosity. And it seems a bit sort of odd. What do you mean by generosity? Why? What's that got to do with anything? Well, it's the very first one. And you think about the meaning of generosity. What you're trying to do is cultivate this relationship with others and this incredible sense of responsibility to help others, to be of benefit to others, So the very first one is to start to think in terms of what do they need. So, the bodhisattvas, what we're trying to do, and we can all do this every day in our practice. When you see sentient beings right now with ego, we see sentient beings, ants, dogs, rats, monkeys, humans, handsome men, ugly ex-boyfriends, whatever it might be, with the sense of I, we see them in terms of whether or not they satisfy our needs. Think about it. This is just the way the life is. Have a look at the world. Look at people, So a monkey will be friendly to its little husband, but will eat somebody else. And, people will be kind to their child, but angry with somebody else's child, because everything is related to what satisfies my needs. Of course, it sounds pretty brutal, but this is the way ego works. We have attachment to all those who satisfy our needs. We have aversion for those who don't satisfy our needs, and we have indifference to everybody else because they do neither. This is the world. Join the universe, folks. So we're trying to break that down. We're trying to break down that artificial way of seeing the world. We're trying to, learn to see others through the lens of what do they need. This is the bodhisattva part. This is the compassion wing. So the very first one is to start to practice this generosity, to want to give. To want to give. So you don't walk around with a big sign on you saying, "Oh, I want to give something to you." You do it. It's private. So instead of seeing sentient beings in terms of what do they do for me, you think of them in terms of what can I do for them. So this very first level is the one of generosity. Now, the next one is the practice of what they call ethics, which is to actually help others. And it's more advanced. But this is the beginning, you know. So like, but our trouble is with generosity. There's 3 levels of generosity they teach. The very first one is the generosity of giving things, material things. So, of course, a symbol of all material things, as far as we're concerned in our culture, is called money. We know this. It's a powerful symbol of having something. And the lack of it is a very powerful symbol, you know, of poverty and all the rest. So we value this stuff very much. I mean, we might sort of forget where we put that that pound of rice, that packet of rice, and we don't worry too much, $2 or something. But if you find $2 less in your purse, you're really worried about it. Money is a very concrete thing for us. And I think it's a minefield. I mean, it's very powerful. This is a really interesting conversation, you know. So, okay, first of all, the normal person, a normal, typical person with attachment and fears and drama, we very much determine our, our status in life much of the time in terms of how much money we have or don't have, how much money we can get or we can't get, you know. And it's a very real thing. And indeed, many people are incredibly poor and really struggle and really suffer. But we've got to look deeper. We've got to look into the mind. Because it's the mind that determines whether money, yes, determines you've got a certain amount of money. Now, we all know there can be some people with not much money, but have very big hearts, very generous people, very open, very happy to give what they've got. We know other people with multi-millions of dollars maybe are so miserly they can't stand to give a single cent to anybody. We know this is true. So what we tend to think is, oh no, I can't give. I don't have enough money. That's not the real reason we can't give. It's because we are nervous about giving, because naturally we see money as very concrete. And if you give this amount, naturally, if you give $5, obviously you've got $5 less. We feel this way. So we're usually very anxious about it. But there's so many things about money. I think there's such a powerful teaching. I mean, we talked about this last week, I think in the Romanian center, I can't remember, but it's very powerful because, you know, it's like, sometimes some people, I mentioned this in the last one, I think it was Romanian teaching, that when I was running the prison project and we paid salaries to people, I decided we'd pay the salaries according to what the people needed. So I'd interview the people, and because I see that many of us have no idea how to manage our money. We're very irresponsible. So sometimes because we're just can't be bothered, or we don't know how, but also sometimes because some people think, oh, money's dirty, I don't want to think about money, you know. So you end up being really irresponsible, but you think you're being very generous because you think you don't care about money. But it's really, for me, it's a very powerful symbol that I think we need to take incredible responsibility for. And it's the beginning of really good ethics, because money, if anybody has any money at all, if it's from your mother because she left it money, then how incredible. That's because of your past generosity in a past life. If you get money every month and a salary, how kind these people hire you and give you money. Yes, you earn it, but it's a very powerful thing. And so we need to treat it, I think, with incredible respect. I've got a feeling that's the very first step in even beginning to develop a healthy relationship with money, therefore beginning to develop a healthy relationship with generosity. So when the very first, it's really powerful to understand the karma of generosity. We mentioned this last week too, not here, but the karma of generosity. When we understand karma more and more, the Buddhist approach, the only reason we have even access to $1 is because of past generosity. We come into this life, you know, morality, non-killing is the cause of getting a human body, but the cause of having things, having a reasonable life, being born to a reasonable family, being born in a culture where you can get a job easily, able to pay your bills. This is not just good luck, and this is not because you're being clever with money, it's because of past generosity. So the very first thing to think about is if you want, you know, to keep growing as a human being and keep growing, developing yourself using the Buddhist tools, you want to open your heart to others. So this very first one of the first 4 of these 6 perfections is to practice this attitude of wanting to give. I mean, I'm not even discussing giving yet. We discussed this last week. It's very powerful. It's got to start in the mind. You will not put your hand in your pocket to take out $5 to give it to a homeless person if your mind doesn't think it. So we've got to train the mind to want to give. And why? In this context here, in the 6 perfections, it's the powerful opening. This wish to give to sentient beings is already developing, is already indicating you've got a strong sense of responsibility to help others. And a powerful way to help others is to give, you know. We can see this, And so that's an attitude. You've got to cultivate that. And it's not, and don't tend to think, oh, well, I'm a generous person. No, I'm not a generous person. We tend to think of seeing it as set in stone. It's not set in stone. We can cultivate it. We can cultivate it, you know. And we have to, like all these things, it's a practice. So you have to start thinking, I want to give. Now, you don't be foolish and rush around throwing out the dollars and saying, aren't I wonderful? Look at me giving. You be reasonable, you be appropriate, you be strategic. But it's an attitude we need to give. And that's why I'm saying to start to manage your money well is a really good step in the right direction. I mean, it's on the bodhisattva. Okay, on the first level of practice, sure, you don't need much money, live a simple life, don't have much, be simple, you know, and that's it. But on the bodhisattva path, you want to think big. You want to think much more powerfully, that you want to help others. And I mean, a powerful way on this planet, isn't it? Money is an incredible tool if it's in the hands of really good people. It can do so much good, you know, or it can do so much evil. We can see that. So we should have a happy attitude towards it and then treat it with incredible respect. And that includes one aspect of generosity is to have incredible honor and good ethics in terms of your bills. And we discussed this last week in this other class. And this is one of the big problems, certainly in the United States, where there's so much student debt. Poor people just bounds, imprisoned by this debt for most of their lives. And then one of the common things we think is, oh, well, it's only the credit card companies. They're evil anyway. So I know I'm not going to pay my bills. But what we don't realize is that look what you're doing to yourself. You not wanting to pay a bill, you being happy if someone doesn't charge you the right price, you know, we don't realize what the harm we're doing to ourselves. So the very first level of practicing generosity is start treating money with respect. Every cent of it. You know, it's just a symbol of having. And so you treat it with respect. You pay your bills, you pay your taxes, be strategic, that's fine, get tax breaks, but treat it with incredible respect. And that begins to give you some sense of then responsibility and power instead of feeling overwhelmed by money. Oh, I can't handle money, or money's not important, or you just spend it every month. You have no idea what you spend it on. That's kind of arrogance, you know. To treat it with real respect, be generous, but know what you're doing. You know, I mean, when I started hiring people for the prison project, I had to start helping people do their budgets. Nobody has a clue how to handle their money. We have this really unhealthy relationship with it, you know. So it's really powerful. So when you treat money with respect and you know it's the fruit of your own past generosity and you want to keep this generosity going, then you need to continue to be generous. So one of the ways of doing that, isn't it? Like the Mormons, you budget in a line item in your budget is giving. It's called giving. You don't say, oh, well, when I've spent my mortgage and when I've bought my food and when I put into my pension plan, if there's any left over, I will give. No, there will never be anything left over. You budget it in. That's a really practical practice to start to develop this wish to give, you know, to budget it into your life. Decide in advance, I want part of my expenses to include giving. Be reasonable, you know, 5%, 2%, 10%, whatever you think. It will never happen until then. And it's a really powerful way to do it, you know. Then you can, and then you think, well, whom can I give it to? Well, this is very interesting. If we've only got a limited amount, you know, you can start your own little thing, and you can start your own nonprofit. You can start to help other people with money. You can give it to other little nonprofits, little groups of people who help other people. But even then, if you've only got a small amount, you know, you've got to also look at the, and this is something very peculiar for us. It sounds very weird. This sounds very selfish. You've got to look at the karmic benefit for yourself. This is not meant to be selfish. It's intelligence. In the same way that if you're trying to invest in something, you look at the returns you'll get. Don't think that's very normal behavior in the commercial world. If you get 10% here, but only 2% there, of course you put your money where you get the 10%. It's reasonable. So here we're talking spiritual returns, and try and hear my point. If we've got a limited amount of money to give, then maybe the most powerful is to give to organizations that help people's minds help people with money, help people, poor people, I mean, and help their minds. I mean, in terms of these levels of generosity in the Bodhisattva path, the very first level is giving material things. The next level is giving spiritual advice. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have a holy halo on your head to give spiritual advice. Just being kind to somebody, helping their mind, that's spiritual advice. That's more marvelous, even more marvelous. Okay, do both. But in our culture, we tend to think, well, giving money is the most real thing, because that, that's real giving. But just merely giving spiritual advice, so that's kind of cheap. And it is, in a way. We often don't like giving money. We would find it easier to give a bit of advice, even if we're not qualified. So giving spiritual advice can be very powerful. And I mean, this sounds pretty shocking, but I remember Lama Zopa said one time, you could give food to every being on the planet. It's incredible. But that just helps their bodies. But you give one piece of spiritual advice to one person, that could lead them to become enlightened, or even to practice a spiritual path, and they in turn can help millions more people over countless lifetimes. I mean, that's a very interesting kind of view to have, So the most powerful, you would say, is to give advice for people's minds. But if you can give money as well, that's a bonus, So if there is an organization that both helps people who are poor and helps people's minds, that's a strategic decision to make. That's where you should put your, your bit of generosity. So you be wise how you give your money, So I'm just chatting away here, just talking, because I think we have very unhealthy relationships. We felt embarrassed about it. We think it's dirty. We think it's not spiritual, or we just we are very mean and miserly. We don't like to think about it. We don't treat it with respect. We don't pay our debts. All of this is, really, it's got to be a healthy, practical relationship, because the more we understand emptiness, nothing has an intrinsic nature. Money is just this means that we've cultivated over the centuries. There's just simply a method for doing transactions with each other. Instead of giving 5 cows in return for 27 kilos of rice, you give a dollar note, you give dollar notes, So don't treat it, I mean, to see what it is, it's very dependent arising, but treat it with incredible respect. Use it wisely. But it's got, again, generosity has to start in the mind. It has to start in the mind. One of our commonest things is, I'm poor, I can't give. Not true. Not true. You can give something, It's just not true. So, and then, of course, there are lots of opportunities to give. One is homeless people. I mean, I mentioned the Romanian class. When I first went to New York in the 70s, I'd never seen homeless people before, except that I hadn't been to India yet. But in the West, I mean, living in Melbourne, Australia, I didn't see homeless people. Went to New York, I was shocked by all the poor homeless people on the Bowery with their purple toes in the middle of the winter. I'd never seen that before. It was shocking. Now it's normal in the world, isn't it? Everywhere you go, you find homeless people. So I think it's a very powerful one, but that's really embarrassing and difficult for us in our culture. We think, well, what if they're going to buy drugs? What if they buy alcohol? Well, it's not your business in a way. It's like, my feeling is, it's a bit like this. You have a job, someone employs you. You make it an arrangement. You have an agreement. You shake hands. You do the job, they'll give you money. If they started sticking their nose in your business and said, well, I'm only going to pay you, Robina, if you don't buy alcohol, if you don't do this, you'll tell them to mind their own business. So it's exactly the same with a homeless person. You see them, you make a decision. So at that moment, you're shaking hands and you're agreeing, I'll give you some money, and up to you what you do with it. Now, if you think they're going to buy a gun that second, then okay, be reasonable. But it's not your business to start being moralistic with them and give them a banana instead. They don't want your banana, they want your $5, please. Or if not 10. I mean, even when I mentioned this, even when I lived in San Francisco 20 years ago, I'd go for a walk at night, knowing I'm going to meet homeless people, junkies, heroin addicts, you name it. So I decided to put money in my pocket, a certain amount that I could afford that day. 5s and 10s and 20s, not 1s and not 50 cents, please. Maybe in 1920, you'd give 20 cents, 50 cents. It's like we don't, and that just proves how we don't like to give. You go into Starbucks, you buy your coffee and your cakes, and you'll even spend it on your friends, and you spend $40, but you come out and you don't even want to give $1 to a homeless person. So it really shows our attitude is not so healthy, because you don't get anything in return from a homeless person. We think it's a waste of money because we don't get something in return. In other words, we're happy to give Starbucks for the coffee. And this is an interesting point as well. What we call that commerce. And we know very well that commerce, in a commercial activity like a cafe, we know very well the budget includes cost of materials, salaries, but we also know there's a piece in there called profit. Well, actually, when you go give you $25 or $40 for your coffee and cakes, a portion of that is a donation to Starbucks. You don't complain. You don't say, I'm not going to give you a donation. I'm going to pay only for the costs. No, they'll throw you out. So you don't mind giving a donation to Starbucks, and could be quite a big percentage, I don't know, but you don't want to give 1 cent to the homeless person. This is very common. I mean, because we've got this complicated relationship with money and the attitude of giving, you know. So it's really good to talk about it and think about it. But the real point of giving is it begins, you know, in one of Tsongkhapa's Lam Rim texts, he says that generosity is the wish-fulfilling jewel with which you can fulfill the hopes of all sentient beings. And it's the basis of the activity of the bodhisattvas, in that it develops us the selflessness and undaunted courage to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment. It's like the first of these perfections. And we all know, people we know who are generous, if they're generous with money, they're generous-hearted, you know. And if you're mean with money, you don't have a very big heart. You're mean, you're closed, you're fearful, you're miserly. We know this. So we've got to think about it consciously and seriously, and not just spend it on yourself and your beloveds. We love giving to our beloveds because we have a vested interest, you know, but we've got to practice wanting to give. I remember I always tell the story, one nun, when we first started the prison project, she gave me some money. She was selling her house and she wanted to give me some proceeds from the house. So she asked Lama Zopa to write a mantra on a crystal, and she was going to put the crystal in the house to help sell it. And Rinpoche said, do not think of receiving, think of giving. That's my motto now for my bodhicitta trust. I have a sign out on my door, bodhicitta trust. Don't think of receiving, think of giving. And of course, like any habit, it grows and you get more courageous. I mean, that's what I learned when we started the prison project. I mean, you're helping prisoners. You can't ask them for a donation. You've got to give them everything. They've got really difficult for prisoners to get anything. They have no computers. You can't just tell them, go buy this book. You have to buy the book for them. So it really was a very powerful way to practice this generosity, this attitude of wanting to give. So you've got to do that first. So in our own lives or in an organization, the start has to be, I want to give. Then you'll find the means. Typically what happens is in our own life as well, we'll see the opportunity to give and then we'll say, oh no, I haven't got enough money. I can't give. Well, that's exactly how it started with the prison project. We had no money. There was nothing. Prisoners started writing to me. And I'd see the need. You'd read the letter. You could not argue. The need was incredible. So the typical one is I look in my pocket. There's no money there. Conclusion, I can't give. No, you have to turn it around. You have to say, I want to give first. Then you will find the way to do it. That's how it starts. It starts in the mind. Anybody who starts organizations of helping others, it begins with seeing the need and then having this courageous responsibility to say, I will do it. That's the attitude of the bodhisattvas. They have the courageous attitude that it's my responsibility, not hoping that, oh, well, someone else will do it. No, you see the need and you think, I will do it. I will give. And then you find the means. And that's the same with our own life. And this is the one about karma. If you walk down the street and there's a homeless person, it's not just some self-existent homeless person. You've got a karmic connection with that person. They're in front of you right now. They're your homeless person. So you put your hand in your pocket, you know, and anticipate it. Put your dollars in your pocket before you go out. That's what I did when I lived in San Francisco. I knew I would meet homeless people. So I decided I have to learn to give. And you give what you can. You be reasonable, you know. So it starts in the mind, and it's a powerful attitude. And as Tsongkhapa says, it's the beginning. And in terms of these perfections, there's levels of practices. It's the first one, because the thought of giving sentient beings what they need, whether it's an ant or a dog or a human, is the breaking down of this sense of me and you, and not just giving to your beloveds, but seeing everybody, you know. It's a very powerful practice, but it's got to start in the mind, and it's got to start with being responsible with money. Treat it with incredible respect. Pay every debt. And even the one of, this is even, it sounds so simple, but it's profound. Start again with the mind. I don't think I've ever met a single human being on the planet who doesn't like paying bills. Nobody likes paying bills. You know, old-fashioned days, like I joke and say old-fashioned days when you had the mailbox and you have a check in one envelope and you have a bill in another. I've never met a person yet who won't be delighted to see the check and who won't groan when they see the bill. Well, start changing your mind. Start being happy to get the bill. And why should you be happy? Well, guess what? These days you pay everything in advance. I understand that, but it used to be you get your service, then you pay for it later. Well, that person's just very kindly given you that service. They've delivered your food, delivered you this, and now they're asking for their money. I mean, of course you should pay it immediately. Of course you should be wanting to pay it immediately instead of, oh, I don't want to pay a bill. Everybody. So what do you think you're doing to your own mind if you don't want to pay a bill? You're blocking yourself from receiving, because you know, when you have this attitude of wanting to give, you start to get very courageous. And then you know it's due to past virtuous karma. And there's this, and it's actually this lovely saying, the Tibetans have it, the great yogis in the mountains who are truly practicing, you know, they say, if you really practice, the food will roll up the hill to you. And I could see that with the prison project. We never did any begging letters. That's one thing I could think of all the non-profits. What we do is send out begging letters to everybody, you know. But I decided we'd never ask for money. We'd never beg. We never, in the 15 years I ran it, we never did one begging letter. I always felt that, you know, if we did a proper job and people saw what we were doing, serving all the prisoners, they would see that we need. And that's all our money always came whenever we needed it, you know. I mean, we worked hard to get the money. But it's a very powerful attitude to develop the wish to give, and it breaks down the barriers between self and other. It opens you up. It makes you more courageous, more optimistic, and more capable, more self-confident. Instead of, oh, I'm poor, I can't do anything. You can't see past your own nose. So to really cultivate generosity, and not just out of a kind of like reputation, to be seen to be giving, you know. You can't pretend like that. It's got to start in the mind, you know. It's very powerful. So ask me some questions about all that if you'd like. Bring up problems. Bring up, you know, ask anything you like, please. If there's anything to say or anything else you'd like to talk about, I don't mind.
Skylar has a question, Venerable Robina.
Good, Skylar. Talk to me, darling.
So when you're talking about giving, well, first off, I was homeless, and then when I was unhomeless, I got, you know, my apartment and everything.
Yeah.
Actually to pay the bills because I was able to.
Yes.
But now I'm kind of in like a vicious circle and mismanaged money. But when I go to eat out, I try to pick places that I can tip the waitress or, you know, the delivery driver or whatever. Good. Is that still like giving? Or
that's
is that
generosity? I mean, that is generosity. Of course it is, Skylar. Anytime we want to give without a thought of getting something in return, it's marvelous. That's called generosity. But we've still got to look at our motivation, though. We've got to look at our motivation and make it very pure motivation. If it's just the motivation of being seen to be generous, I mean, that can be very powerful for us. We like to be visible, you know, so we've got to watch that. We've got to catch that. Do you understand my point? But anytime we give without any expectation of return, that's a really powerful action of giving. Absolutely, yes.
Even though like they still have a job, but like they're doing, like I always kind of think of it too, like I could never be a waitress, and like they're doing this job that I can't do, you know, and, you know, I get bonuses sometimes. So sometimes even, you know, I pay with a credit card and the credit card's like, oh my gosh, you tipped too much. And I'm like, no, I really didn't. And so
I think, you know, the general idea is it doesn't matter whether a person's you see, this is the point. It's not a question of only giving to poor people. It's not a question of that. That is a marvelous thing to do because poor people very directly need things, but also generosity to anybody. I mean, generosity to somebody, even if the waitress gets the biggest salary in the cafe, if it's just a tradition that you give, you know, we know that there are tips are a part of the deal. So you show your appreciation. Nothing wrong with that. You don't give contingent upon whether a person needs it. That's not the issue. It's a question of your practice from your side with a pure heart wishing to give. It's important. Thank you. Understand? Yeah. Good, Skylar. Thank you. What else, people? But you've got to be strategic because some people, because we're so hungry to be seen to be generous, we make a mess of it, and it's not very. It doesn't. You know, we misuse money. You've got to be wise. It's a very powerful resource that can be used so powerfully to benefit, to do much benefit. Think of it as a resource to do good. I mean, there's a friend of mine. You know, there's somebody I know I've heard about who say, like, let's say a person is he's quite rich. And so I asked him one time, why did you do that in giving a certain amount of money to somebody? He said, oh, because I can. That's not a valid reason to give. That's not a valid reason. That's kind of like hubris. That's kind of arrogance. Oh, well, I've got enough money, I can afford it. That's not the point. The point of generosity is to open your heart, to make you closer to others and sincerely wishing to benefit others. So it's got to be strategic. It's got to be appropriate, not just because you can. Everybody can, according to what according to what your you know, according to what your capacity is. So it's an asset. And in a way, we're talking on the way we're talking here is it's a practice. It's our own practice. We're discussing here not the needs of the other, but it's our own practice of opening our heart and breaking down the barriers between self and others. You know, that's really the function of this practice. And then, of course, the extra part is that people get something, because this is another whole point, which is a bit odd for us in the West. We know there's Lama Zopa never stops talking about this. There's practices of generosity when it comes to our own relationship with the Buddhas. Now, you think I've got my statue on the altar, our morning practices, you know, I've got different altars here. Morning practices, we make our water bowl offerings. There's this ritual we have of making offerings to the Buddha. Well, obviously, the first question is, what the hell does a Buddha want with a water bowl? What does a Buddha want with a barge of flowers? And it's a really obvious thing. You think, well, that's because we only think of giving in terms of if a person needs it. But this is not the issue here. The whole practice of generosity, one aspect of it is the benefit to you of opening you up to make you a more powerful, more optimistic, more helpful human being. It's a practice for you to develop you into a marvelous person. Do not doubt that part. So the whole point therefore in these terms of giving to the Buddha as a part of your daily practice, it's a huge practice. It opens you up. It opens you up, you know, and it connects you with the holy beings, with the Buddhas, that is a method to help you increase your own spiritual development. So it's a very powerful practice. It's a major practice, actually. I mean, Lama Zopa is famous for his generosity, not just to the Buddhas, but to everybody. He's famous for this, you know. So anyway, what else? Somebody got some questions or points to bring up. In other words, it's a lot to think about. There's a lot to think in this, not just, oh, I'll give $1. There's a lot to think, look into the meaning behind this, to see what it says about ourselves, you know. Yes, Francisco. Who is that then speaking? Yes, talk to me. Unmute. Yes, I can see you. Unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Gracias por tus enseñanzas, Venerable.
Good.
Hace 4 años, Fer? Hace 4 años. Okay, thank you. Hace 4 años decidí comenzar mi vida de una nueva manera en la cual yo tenía todo, entonces decidí empezar de cero. Yo nunca pensé que empezar de cero iba a ser tan difícil. Yo ganaba mucho dinero, era famoso, dejé de ganar dinero, dejé de tener trabajo, me aboqué más al Dharma y no he podido hasta la fecha pagar mis deudas. Quiero pagar mis deudas, trato de ser generoso, pero no se han vuelto a dar las causas y circunstancias para restablecer, digamos, lo que yo estaba antes. ¿Es muy malo no poder pagar mis deudas, aunque quiera pagar mis deudas? ¿O qué actitud mental debería tener para no sentirme tan frustrado en relación a eso?
4 years ago, I changed everything. I used to have a lot of money and I used to be really famous here in Mexico. And then suddenly I lost everything and I haven't been able to gain the same amount of money, and it has been difficult for me. So how do I manage to practice that generosity even with not having that amount of money?
I understand. So this is what I'm saying, Francisco. It has to start in the mind. So, you know, if we take the view of okay, you translating as I go, or you want me to stop, Fernando? Keep going. Okay.
I'm translating simultaneously.
Okay. So, you know, Francisco, if we understand the Buddhist approach to this, why you had money, the main reason was your past generosity in past lives, and you came into this life, and then and then the karma, you could argue that the generosity karma ran out and your money finished, you know. So there's one. So then the key thing is then how to develop generosity again. No, sorry. If the goal is to get money, then you have to have the karma there to be able to get the money. But the point is, the real point from your question, I'm sorry, I'm saying too many things, is that you need to still have the view, have the attitude, Francisco, even if you're really poor, you still want to cultivate a generous heart, that if I can give, I will give, not judging your giving based on how much money you've got. That's very common in our culture. So have the attitude of wanting to give. And that's why in the Buddhist view, you know, one of the practices that we do is giving to the Buddhas. We do practices of giving that can be a way of cultivating, again, more generosity karma of your own, so that you will also be coming to receive money again. But it's got to be the attitude in the heart first. Do you understand what my point is, Francis? It's got to come from the heart first. You've got to want to give, which means whenever you see sentient beings, even if you can't afford it now, you even think, I wish I could give. That's already a powerful thought. Not, oh, I can't give, I've got no money. No, you have to want to give. And then that actual thought can nourish your own generosity karma to then ripen in you receiving things. Do you understand? Do you understand, Francisco? Good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Venerable Robina. I understand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
It starts in the mind. This is the most important point. Good. Thank you. And then also treat your money, whatever you've got now, be very ethical. Do not cheat. Be very ethical about money. This is very powerful. Do you understand? Good. Okay, people, questions? Anything else, my dear people? I think another point that came up in the Romanian teaching, hang on, Christina, was another whole aspect, which is very much the flip side of our difficult relationship with money. People are embarrassed to receive. People don't like being given things. They don't know how to think to accept other people's generosity. So when you are more relaxed about money and you understand the karma of generosity, you will happily receive gifts from other people. You will be delighted to receive someone's gift and you'll be so grateful. In fact, it's very interesting. When we take the bodhisattva vows, see, the point of vows at the very first level, the vows are not kill, not steal, not lie. They are to protect you from from suffering. They make you into a nice person. Then you've got the more advanced level of vows, which are to help you help others. So at this level, let's say Rosanna asks me out for lunch and I can't be bothered, Oh, sorry, Rosanna, not today. Well, I just broke a bodhisattva vow, because my vow is to, by accepting Rosanna's gift of lunch, I'm giving her the opportunity to create the karma of generosity. So by my saying, no, thank you, I don't help Rosanna. And this is the point. Our reason for saying no is because it doesn't suit me, which is totally self-centered. So this is forcing us to think of what's best for the other person. So let's say Rosanna rings up and I've had my lunch, but she's offered me lunch and I can see it's good. And I'll say, thank you, Rosanna, how kind you are. And I will go for a second lunch. She doesn't have to know that. So in other words, this forces us to think of what's best for the other person. This is another whole level, actually. And in fact, if by saying no without any thought, then I break a bodhisattva vow. I prevented Rosanna from creating the generosity karma. Even if, typically you're at a meal. This sounds so silly, but you think about it. And you offer me some bread, but I'm gluten-free. Oh, no, thank you. I don't want that bread. Well, excuse me, that's mean. It's just only thinking of mine. You just offered me kindly some bread. You reached across the table and you offered me some bread and I gave your gift back to you. How rude of me. Say, thank you, how kind you are. I will take your bread. Now, no one says you have to eat it. So it's a whole way of thinking of what's best for the other person. You accept people's generosity. Otherwise you prevent them. It's just self-centered, So it's very powerful practice, actually, to accept someone's generosity. How kind you are. Thank you so much. Even when I walk down the street, in the big cities and people hand out their brochures for their shop, I even will accept that piece of paper. I don't want to buy a coat, but I'll accept their piece of paper. They even gave me something, so I will accept it, And also it's yourself, if someone says thank you to you, it's very touching. Not no thank you. No, I don't want that. No, I don't need that. It's kind of cutting a person off, It's very interesting to think about. It's humble to accept someone else's gift. It's very important. It's so important. It's good for you and good for the other person. What else, darlings? What else? Anything else? What do you think?
Did Christina have a question?
Oh, that's right,
Christina,
Christina.
Christina, yes, go ahead.
Good, darling. Talk to me.
Venerable Robina, I just wanted to ask about, at some point, we may need to ask people for help or for something. And how do we ask with that same generous attitude?
You mean ask for money?
ask for money or ask for anything? I mean,
no, we're talking material things. We're
okay,
talking
so ask
straight
how
down
to,
to
yeah.
earth.
Well, yeah, if you need to ask people for money,
but what, you have to give me a scenario. You gotta be precise. Give me a scenario, please. It's too general. Darling.
Okay. Well, recently I had to ask people to help. I had to ask people for money to help with a goal that I'm trying to achieve. Or even in fundraising, I mean, we ask for money as well.
Oh, wait a minute. It depends if it's personal or an organization. They're two separate things. So you're talking about personally. You need
personally.
You mean doing those things online where you do those GoFundMe things and that type of thing? You needed people to fund you to do something.
Yeah.
Well, then, darling, I mean, it's like, that's, that's asking someone to be generous to you. Then it's a whole different discussion, really. I mean, you're not giving anybody, you're asking. So it's got to, first of all, for the karma to be pure, it's got to be a good motivation. And and then secondly, obviously you've got to be strategic in whom you ask. You can't just ask, I mean, you can ask the world, you can do a GoFundMe if you like. It's just the way the world is now. People accept this. So, I mean, I think the attitude has to be of incredible gratitude, not wasting 1 cent of it, using every cent exactly as you promised, and having a sincere wish to repay their kindness in one way or another. It's got to be that, not just the hubris and the greed of, oh, aren't I lucky, And in other words, your motivation has got to be so pure, Christina, so pure. You understand?
Yeah, I understand.
So if you're working for a non-profit, or if you're working for a group that does ask for money to help other people, it's just the same. You can't have this expectation that people should give. And I must say, with some of the non-profits and some of our Buddhist centers, we have this sense of righteousness. Oh, well, look at us, we're doing all this holy job, and you tell people how much merit they're creating, and you must give us your money. I think it's horrible. It's awful. It's kind of manipulating people. And that's part of the problem with non-profits, all this strategy to get people to give you their money. I think it's a terrible attitude. I mean, that's why in the prison project, I never did one begging letter. I just think it can be so evil, because you can manipulate people, and you can sound so holy, sitting on your high throne of goodness, and telling people they've got to give you the money. I mean, it's just awful. It's just awful. I think I really feel that if you're really doing a good job and people can see the job you're doing, I'm talking about organizations now, people will give you, the money will come. You don't need to be asking for it and to manipulate people. So whether you're working for a Buddhist center or your own self, it's got to be very pure, very sincere, and a genuine appreciation of it, and use every cent exactly as you've said, and not waste 1 cent, and really want to repay the kindness of others in one way or another. That's important, I would say. You understand?
You. Yes, I understand. Thank you.
What else, people? Yes, Cassia. Yes, darling.
Hi, Robina.
Oh, sweetheart.
So this is very interesting. I was just talking to my mother before your class tonight about money and, loans for our house and all these things, and not, we just get in our own way. But before you started talking about receiving, I was thinking that's a very hard thing for me to do. Not that I don't feel gratitude towards people who are being generous, but in my mind, I think like, oh, it's because like they think that I'm like, I need help, or, I just get in my own head, like it's almost hard to receive, it's hard to say thank you instead of just feeling like a pity party.
So
Does that make sense?
So the context you're discussing here is that if you don't have money and you do need it, you mean like that? Some people give you money because you're poor or something, and they see that you need it, right?
Well, yeah. Like, for example, a friend recently, they bought a house and they have a lot of land, and they offered for my son and I to put a structure, a building on that land to live there. And, I just thought it's wonderful. It's so kind. And I just thought, oh, it's because it's difficult to afford to buy a house. Maybe they just feel sorry for us.
Well, that's just, I know, but that's just a very common attitude. And if we look at that carefully, that's the flip side of pride, Cassia. That's pride. Okay. The flip side of pride is low self-esteem, or they think I'm just small. That's really pride and arrogance. It's kind of a hubris, If they are being patronizing, that's their problem. You've got to be careful if they are being patronizing, because then it's going to turn bad. But if they're being sincere in generosity, it's unbelievably kind of them. And you take it with such humility and such gratitude and the wish to repay their kindness. I mean, you've got to be clear. Maybe they've got the wrong motivation. You've got to be really clear before you agree to it. But that one of, they just feel sorry for me. That's the flip side of pride, darling. It's really not, it's not comfortable. And that's a very common way people think of receiving things. You feel embarrassed, or, all this complicated now our mind. You get in your own head. Exactly. That's incredibly fortunate. And then when you understand that if you haven't understand karma, that even the fact that will someone give you $1, that's the fruit of your own past generosity. So if you're so fortunate with past generosity that someone offers you a piece of land, my goodness, how dare you say no? Okay, be strategic, be skillful, do contracts, get it correct. Don't be naive, but do not feel that other way. Be happy. It's your virtuous karma that you've got it. You know, how amazing.
Okay.
Do you understand?
I do. So to counteract pride, then if that comes up a lot.
The flip side of pride is low self-esteem. I'm hopeless. I'm no good. I'm poor. I'm nothing. It's very concrete and very self-centered. And actually, it's like when we're overinflated, that's called pride. When it's underinflated, that's called low self-esteem. They're the flip side of each other, and they're both dangerous. Just have some humility. Humility comes with self-respect. Humility is a really soft heart that appreciates others and is really grateful in a sincere, wholesome way. And that comes with, when you're humble, you're content. When you've got low self-esteem, you're not content. And so low self-esteem comes with arrogance, I would say, and then humility comes with self-confidence. You're able to very comfortably say, how amazing, how kind, thank you so much. It won't be to do with ego, you know. So cultivate that instead. Do you understand?
I do. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah. Who else, sweethearts? And the other thing is, I think with giving, I see this with I always quote my experience with the prison project, not trying to say I was so holy, but when you start in the beginning, you know, it started with one person writing me a letter. I was editing Mandela at the time, and this letter came from a prisoner to the editor of Mandela, who happened to be me. And the letter sat on my desk for a while. Then I wrote back and sent him a book. And within a year, we had 40 people writing. And so each time another letter came, I'd think, God, I've got no money. We had nothing in the budget. How can I give? But then you think, look at the need. So then you, like I said before, you change your view. You say, okay, we will give. And then you'll find the means to do it. And that makes you courageous. If always you're thinking, oh, I'm poor, I've got nothing, I'm nobody, then you're just small-minded. You've got no self-respect, no self-esteem, and you've got no courage. But beginning, you see the need and you go, I can help. And then before you know it, you look back and you look at all how much you've done and how much the work is growing, and you get more confident, more courageous, and then you're hugely purifying your mind, getting closer to others, and then you feel confident because you're facilitating other people, and you get brave from that, and you feel good about it. So it's really an excellent practice to do jobs that's why when you're feeling depressed and self-centered and lonely and sad, which is real suffering, begin to even do one tiny thing for one being is a powerful practice to take you out of your own misery, you know, and it makes you courageous because you just see the benefit. Even if it's helping a dog, an ant, you feel good. It's a powerful practice to counteract loneliness and depression. It's a powerful practice, I tell you, because it forces you out of yourself and you're doing something good for others, and that makes you happy. And then you feel glad, you know, you feel confident. And then it grows. Before you know it, the prison project grew and grew and grew. And at some point we were having 1,000 letters a month from people, you know, because the work you're doing grows. It's how all these nonprofits grow. It's how any work you do, it starts small and it grows and you get more confident from it. It's marvelous practice. It's a marvelous practice. But you start small with the thought, with the mind first, I want to give. And then you give what you can. Start small. But like I'm giving the background to treat money with respect, to be very ethical, to pay your bills. And if you can't pay your credit card debt, don't just leave it. Negotiate with the credit card companies. You don't just leave it. It's so heavy, so heavy. You're just blocking yourself from receiving, you know, by not paying. You've got to be so honorable with money. It's really powerful, I tell you. Be very sincere, very honest. And it's got nothing to do with anybody sees it. That's why the commonest thing people say is, oh, the credit card companies, they budgeted in all the losses anyway. They don't need it. That's not the issue. Look what you're doing to yourself is the point. You're the beneficiary of generosity, and you are the opposite to the beneficiary of lack of generosity and miserliness. But you treat it with respect. You don't just say, oh, I don't know how much I spend in a month. You should know how much you spend. You should know exactly what you do with your money. It's a powerful resource. It's hubris to think, oh, it doesn't matter. That's mistaken, because there's so much you can do with money if you use it well. You can make money, make more money. It's a powerful resource in the world. And if you're not greedy and you're not attached to money, then you'll see it like that and you'll be happy to use it to help others. That's the point, you know. It's an amazing resource. But it starts with the attitude in the mind, a correct attitude towards money, towards having, knowing its source, knowing about, and then having it with total ethics, treating it with such respect. So important. Then the food will roll up the hill to you, I promise. There's wonderful stories about Lama Zopa. He's got this amazing karma of being generous. People, he's famous for, famous for generosity. He's just famous. When you have a meeting with Lama Zopa at one of the Buddhist centers, you walk in with your beautiful gift. I can guarantee you the person who comes in after will walk out with it. Definitely. So you can't get attached to any of your gifts if you give them to Lama Zopa. He's like this channel for receiving and then giving. He's famous for this. And so also one wonderful story. Like 30 years ago now, one of the big monasteries, which is the monastery of our lamas, which is down in South India now, not in Tibet, the abbot there asked Lama Zopa to start to raise money to start a food fund, because the tradition in Tibet for centuries has been very medieval. The rich monks have their food and they share it with the poor ones, and the poor ones have nothing. So the monasteries aren't usually have the tradition of having kitchens and providing the food and providing all that. Lama Yeshe, in the very beginning, when he first met Western people, hippies in the 70s, and then started having classes at Kopan Monastery, he was really impressed with the Christian thing of hospitals and the Catholic nuns, and the way of that giving was institutionalized. He was very impressed by that. And so he started the tradition at Kopan Monastery, which is unusual among the Tibetans, of providing everything for the monks. So all the Western courses would fund the monastery, that they'd be given their robes, they'd be given their food, given their medicine. They were totally taken care of. So now this is what happened at this monastery. So like 30 years ago, there are like thousands of monks there. So Lama Zopa was asked by the abbot to please raise some money so they could have a food fund and build a really good kitchen and provide really good food for the monks, So this a bit sort of anecdotal, the story, but Lama Zopa's attendant, Venerable Roger, he kept waiting for Lama Zopa to look like he couldn't see any evidence of Lama Zopa raising any money, and he was wondering what was going on. So at some point he was in Taiwan, and the thing is, the Chinese are famous for their generosity. In Taiwan, they've got this incredible number of monasteries, and the monasteries give every single thing to all the lay people, and the lay people totally give everything to the monastery. So it's a really mutually good relationship. There's never any charges. You never pay a cent for a course. You don't pay a cent for a book. Everybody gives, it's amazing. They're really famous for this. So he's in Taiwan having a meeting with some abbess, and she told Roger the next morning after the meeting with Lama Zopa that the night before she had a dream in which Kuan Yin, so Kuan Yin is this famous Buddha. It's like Chen Reizig, but for the Chinese, she's the Buddha of compassion, that she had a dream in which Kuan Yin appeared to her and said, this very special person is coming tomorrow morning, give him whatever he wants. So Lama Zopa says, okay, I need $972.24, please. And she gave it. That's how he raises his money. He's got a special line to the Buddhas, So that's the thing I learned in the prison project, not begging. If you do a good job, and you want to give, and we had to give to the prisoners, there's no choice, then you create the cause to receive, It's really logic, but we've got to trust that logic. It's very powerful. Anyway, haven't had any dreams of Kuan Yin lately, so there you go. So what else, darling people? Come on. Questions. We've got 8 minutes. I find this a very tasty topic because it's got many layers to it, Especially in our culture, we have such difficulty with attitude towards money. We're so conflicted about it. There's, like Cassia said, we're conflicted about receiving as well.
Venerable Robina, we have a question from Paula.
Yes, Paula. Hello, sweetheart.
Please excuse the way I bumble around in these classes and I don't end correctly and I don't stand. Can I just say to you that I'm an accidental participant. I came here to do some administration and decided to stay.
Good.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is just for fun. May I share?
Yes, tell us.
So my resources are in a difficult situation right now. Let's just say that. Okay. And so this talk could not be more pertinent. Good. And the story is this. I was kind of thinking, well, how am I going to pay for food? I live in Japan. The postman is blethering on in Japanese. I don't understand a word. He wants me to sign for something. And I just sign, I just whatever they give me, I just sign. And he's on, and he wants to take his redelivery notice out the box. Okay, dude, out comes the and I couldn't understand what this was about. What it was, they were distributing $500 worth of tokens that I can use for food.
Good
and
Lord.
he wanted to get his redelivery back in case I try and say I didn't get it.
My God. So there you go. You're one. That's how it is. If you're doing a good job and you're being generous and you're offering your service to others, it will come. It will roll up the hill to you. You just proved it, Paola. That's a beautiful story. Thank you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So yes, it's the generosity of the Japanese government, but it's also your merit, your past generosity ripening. And that's why, I mean, it happens to be that Paola is serving the Tupten Norbuling and working for others. That might be not directly giving money, but it comes back as money, Giving and receiving, they are very, very related. It's a wonderful story, Paola. Thank you. So it gives us courage. What else, darlings? Come on. No, any more stories about the food rolling up the hill to you? There's Judith. Hello, sweetheart. My dearest Judith. Hello, darling. My dear Judith, I've known for about 4,000 years in California. How are you, dearest Judith?
I'm just fine. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to see you, darling.
But what a wonderful thing that I can sit here and see you right in front of me.
That's it. Yes, Judith.
Yes.
I know, darling. Thank you. I'm happy to see you, darling.
Yeah. Thank you.
Judith worked for years and years offering her service. Well, let me tell Judith, can I tell them the story about your burning house? Can I tell that story, Judith?
If you wish.
Oh, absolutely. Judith and Jack had a house. They have a house in Marin County full of all, they're Buddhists. They have all these things in their house, a lovely house. They have maybe some insurance on the house. And one day they come home, the house is gone. It burned down, the entire house. Well, you know what? Within a few months, I think, without asking anybody, they ended up with more possessions than they had before. Everybody had statues, books. They had more knives and more forks and more plates and more statues than before because people just gave. So that's the fruit of generosity. Wasn't that true, Judith? That's right. So that's the same kind of story as Paola. They had more things than they had before. That was a joke. Everybody spontaneously gave, all their Buddhist community, And Judith spent her life serving. She worked at Kopan for years, taking care of all the little monks. They call her Amala, which means mother. Mummy. It means mummy. She's the monk's mummy, She worked there for years. So that's all her generosity coming back, So we know stories like this. You know yourself, you do one kind action, it will come back. You see this. We see this even in short term. Forget about long-term karma, So we have to remember this. And this is the generosity of your heart, reaching out to others. It's the most powerful method for us to receive, and don't be apologetic about it. It's marvelous, and we should give courage from it, It's a powerful antidote to self-centeredness, to hubris, to arrogance, to sadness. It's a powerful antidote. We have to remember it. What can I do? What can I give to think this, So, darlings, that'll do. To finish on that note, okay? Have courage. Open your hearts, but be ethical and be strategic with money. Don't be foolish. Treat it with incredible respect. Every cent of it is the fruit of your own generosity in the past. And that's, that's for Francisco. And then may you get rich again, Francisco, so you can help other people. Okay? Thank you, darlings. Much, much love. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, everybody.